remembering the victims of Charlie Hebdo in France, the crypto-terror connection, and more. It's Tuesday, the 8th of January, 2019, and this is The Hot Zone.
This is The Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hi everyone, Je suis Charlie. That was the meme going around the internet about 4 years ago, the day after two Algerian migrants, brothers, blasted their way into the offices of the French satirical magazine called Charlie Hebdo in Paris. Armed with rifles, pistols, and even a rocket launcher, they killed 12 people and injured 12 more. The gunmen said they belonged to Al-Qaeda in Yemen. After systematically executing most of the magazine's staff inside the offices, the brothers fled, killing a wounded police officer outside in the street. They escaped, and it set off a nationwide manhunt, which lasted 2 whole days and ended in a 9-hour standoff out near Charles de Gaulle Airport before the men were finally killed by French Special Operations Forces. Now, several related attacks also happened in France in those 2 days, including the siege of a kosher supermarket. A friend of the two terrorists held 19 hostages there and eventually murdered 4 of them who were Jews. But the violence didn't end when the monsters finally assumed room temperature. The magazine reopened soon after and published a new issue of the magazine, which was like a big middle finger to the terrorists, depicting Muhammad holding a sign that says, Je suis Charlie. Radical Muslims around the world then went out and proved once again that they have no sense of humor or irony as they staged violent demonstrations in Muslim garden spots like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Algiers, Khartoum, and Mogadishu. In Niger, Boko Haram terrorists burned dozens of Christian churches and at least 10 people were killed. In Belgium, police killed several other terrorists who were planning to attack vendors who were selling the new issue of Charlie Hebdo. And in Iran, keeping it classy, they held a Holocaust cartoon competition. Look, this event paints a stark picture of the clash of worldviews that's happening in Europe and many other places around the world. I remember on a trip to Jordan some years ago, talking with some Muslim men at a resort there. And they were asking me what it's like to live in a Christian country like the United States, where you could just walk down the street and have sex with any woman you want. And I was like, what? And they explained that, look, they watch American television and they could see what our country was like. So look, I tried to explain that Christians in America are also very offended by the rampant immorality that's displayed on our television programs. And so the men's next question really stunned me. They said, well, why don't you stop it then? Why don't you go kill those people? How do you explain that in a Western civilized country, we don't just murder people who offend us? This is their culture. It's what they know. And the mistake Westerners make is thinking that a secular culture in our countries, which believes strongly in nothing, will somehow supplant the kind of religious fervor that is being seen in radical Islam. It just won't. And that's why these Algerian migrants can live in Europe for years before just one day picking up a machine gun and going out and executing their neighbors. The saddest detail about the Charlie Hebdo shootings to me is that one of the office staff killed was the editor-in-chief, a man they call Sharb. Sharb had earlier applied for a firearms permit in France because he'd received many death threats and was on Al-Qaeda's hit list. In fact, the Hebdo offices were firebombed in 2011 by another terrorist, so they knew they were at risk. But Sharb's gun permit was denied, and it left him and his staff completely helpless when those two monsters broke into their offices that terrible day 4 years ago. The terrorists didn't have permits for their weapons either, but it's clear, yet again, that making people more vulnerable never makes them safer. France has suffered some of the worst terror attacks in Europe over the past several years. This summer, I was in Paris for Bastille Day, which also now marks the anniversary of one of the most horrific ramming attacks ever seen in Europe. So it's Bastille Day here in France, and millions of people across the country are gearing up for huge celebrations that will happen today. You can imagine there's still a pretty massive terror threat when you have these kind of crowds gathering around the country. And for that reason, the police and the military are out in force. In Paris alone, they've deployed 12,000 police officers, and they've got special operations police on every train running in the country. And that's because they know that that threat is real. The French government has actually done a pretty good job of cracking down on the terrorists. As a matter of fact, in 2016, we saw an attack virtually every month. And so far this year, we've only had 2 terror attacks, and that comes down to 2 things. Number one, the government has gotten much better at thwarting attacks. We've had quite a few thwarted attacks in the last year. And number 2, the United States and other countries have done a good job of just decimating ISIS across the globe. But the bottom line is, today is the 2-year anniversary of the huge terror attack that took place in the south of France, in Nice, where a terrorist plowed into a crowd of people like this one behind me and killed more than 80 and wounded almost 500.
I wanted to see the place where the attack happened, and since it was the 2-year anniversary, I jumped in my car and drove 10 hours from Paris to Nice to see the celebrations and to see what kind of memorial they had planned for the 2nd anniversary of the attack. I was the only American journalist in attendance.
Just to give you an idea of how on edge this city is, here in Nice just a few days ago at a soccer game, somebody let off some sparklers and it caused a stampede and 27 people were taken to the hospital. It just goes to show that people still don't feel very safe here because they know that they're still a target. So this is the city of Nice. This is the promenade along the beach in the south of France, right along the Mediterranean. This place used to be famous just for its beautiful beaches and beautiful women, but now it's infamous for the tragedy that took place right here about this time, 2 years ago tonight, on Bastille Day, as a madman drove a 19-ton cargo truck right through this crowd and murdered scores of people. But there's a lot of security here tonight for obvious reasons, and they've made other changes as well, like the bollards that are posted along this road to make sure that something like that will never happen here ever again.
The memorial began with 86 giant spotlights and 86 balloons for each of those killed in the attack. They reached into the night sky, and the crowd fell silent in remembrance. Some shed tears. It was a sobering reminder that evil men are out there, waiting to destroy our way of life. It's also a reminder that we must be prepared to confront that evil when it comes.
Europe's changing fast, and it's hard to overstate just how severe those changes will be as the continent makes a major demographic shift over the next 10 to 20 years, by which time it might be a majority Muslim region. And that's not racism, it's not alarmism, it's just arithmetic. Muslims in Europe breed at a rate that's exponentially higher than Europeans, to say nothing of the millions of Muslims flooding in as refugees. And those 2 worldviews are not compatible. So for this reason, you can expect to see more violence as these cultures battle for supremacy until one of them supersedes the other. What that means in practical terms is if you're going to go visit European cities, you should be increasingly aware of the threat and stay aware of your surroundings at all times. That said, it's still extremely unlikely that you'll be involved in a terror attack no matter where you go. So don't let the risks keep you at home. Okay, let's move on and talk about cryptocurrencies. You've probably heard about Bitcoin, and if you're like most people, you really don't understand what it is or how it works. Cryptocurrencies are just a way of creating or storing value that's not tied to any government or other institution. And it's pretty much impossible to hack because of the way that the crypto ledger is distributed on what's called the blockchain. Now, lots of money is being made and lost in cryptocurrencies, and that will only increase probably in the next couple of decades. But one aspect of these new instruments has become a powerful tool for terrorists. See, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Monero and Zcash and all those, they're not exactly anonymous, but they're more like pseudonymous in nature, which means anyone can see the transactions that are being made, But the people behind those transactions are kind of hidden because basically all that's shown is their like account number, which doesn't have to be connected to a name or any other personally identifiable information, probably. Now, because of this feature, cryptocurrencies have become the go-to financing option for terror groups around the world. They raise money through like cybercrime or extortion, or even just through taking donations and then take payment in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, which is actually makes it so much easier for them to raise money. Now, with the Islamic State's caliphate in Iraq all but lost, the revenue they were getting from oil and taxes has been taken away from them. But cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Zcash and Monero and others are giving the terror group an alternative source of funding. Transactions are swift and they're hard to track, which makes disrupting them very, very difficult for government organizations. In addition to Islamic terror organizations, rogue states like North Korea and Venezuela have begun mining and using cryptocurrency, and even have thousands of hackers working to steal Bitcoin from exchanges and individuals around the world. Combined with encrypted messaging apps like Telegram, this makes it really easy for bad people to skirt international banking regulations and move money around the globe at the click of a mouse. One report, for example, showed that over 40% of all illicit transactions in Europe involve payment in Bitcoin. So far, the U.S. government has really been unable to do much about this, and it's not exactly clear what they could do to stop it if they tried. Cryptocurrencies don't lend themselves very easily to regulation by governments, and that's kind of the point behind cryptocurrencies. But that doesn't stop governments from trying, obviously. And as usual, more regulation just makes it harder for the law-abiding to use this technology, but actually does very little to stop the criminals. This is a lesson we keep seeing over and over. The government's hammer is to pass regulations. And to politicians, just about everything looks like a nail. But lots of laws just throw sand in the gears of progress, pretty much. Now, the blockchain is definitely going to change our lives in ways that we haven't even figured out yet. It already is, really. But like any new technology, sometimes it evolves faster than big bureaucracies do, and that leads to some real risks that you need to be aware of and be careful about. If you're going to invest in crypto, be aware that it's still speculation at this point. It's not investing. And be very careful how and where you store your currency. Well, that's all we have for today, folks. It's really good to have you here with me, and I really appreciate it. Please like and share the podcast and subscribe to our YouTube page. I'm also raising money to take to Syria with me here in a couple of weeks. So if you'd like to, for example, help some Syrian Christians or people who have lost their homes to the fight against ISIS, I'll bring you their stories directly from the front lines. It's a great way for you to not just watch the news, but get involved in making it better. So just go over to patreon.com/hotzone and subscribe, or donate via PayPal at hotzoneholton@gmail.com. That's all one word, hotzone, HOLTON, @gmail.com. Well, we'll be back here again tomorrow, and I hope you will too. I'm Chuck Holton. Thanks for listening to The Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.